Hello and welcome to JPod. This is a podcast on journalists and journalism. My name is Krishna Prasad and it's great to have you here. In India's nearly barren media landscape, it's difficult to spot any individual or institutional resistance to the doors of freedom shutting loudly in the background. How heartwarming, therefore, to see an ordinary citizen stand up and hold a mirror to the news media, paradoxically by using the same media. And how heartwarming to see that the citizen who feels so deeply and strongly about the state of newspapers and television, and indeed the country, is not some old fogey, but a millennial. In the classified advertisement section of the Hindu today is a 36-word obituary. It reads, quote, "With profound regret, we announce the demise of Miss M.E. Dia, beloved daughter of Mr. E.E. Dom, F.R., and wife of Mr. T. Ruth in New Delhi on 8 September 2020, mourned by friends and family," unquote. Minus the abbreviation, it's an advertisement announcing the death of the media, the daughter of freedom and the wife of truth. And the advertisement is a throwback to 1975 when Indira Gandhi declared the emergency. Then, a 26-year-old journalist called Ashok Mahadevan placed a similar advertisement in the Times of India in which he mourned the death of democracy, husband of truth, loving father of liberty, and brother of faith, hope, and justice. Ashok Mahadevan later rose to be the editor of the Reader's Digest in India. The young man who was inspired by Ashok Mahadevan's action 45 years ago to place an advertisement in the Hindu today in 2020 is Kartik Sahni, a Delhiite who works in Bombay. Kartik is 24 years old, born in 1996. A graduate of St. Stephen's College in Delhi, Kartik works for a consulting firm and is headed to Harvard University to do a master's in public policy. In this episode of JPod, Kartik Sahni discusses why he raised his voice on media freedom today and what role the media should really be playing in today's India. Hi Kartik, many congratulations on the obituary advertisement you have placed in the Hindu today announcing the death of M.E. Dia. In these bleak times, this is almost an act of heroism for someone like me, and especially by someone like you. So congratulations, Kartik, on your courage and your conviction.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Krishna, and thank you so much for inviting me to this call as well. I personally, when I was doing it, I didn't think that this would be lauded as a heroic effort because I thought it was something that would be that is quite should be expected in a country like ours. But the fact that today it's become a novelty is also telling you a lot about our time.
Absolutely. Why did you decide to place this advertisement, and why now?
See, I'm not from the media. I'm not affiliated to any like political entity. Like I don't have any motive, right? But so I come from this from the point of view of a very regular citizen who is dependent on the media for all the information that they get, pretty much. For someone who's not at the higher echelons of power, the print media, the TV media, social media, those are really the outlets from where you can be connected with the world. Uh, and like and I think that aspect of its duty was not being discharged by the media over the last few weeks, definitely, but I think the broader trend is over the last few months or maybe a few years as well. Um, I think it really came out of a place where I was quite disappointed at the fact that we weren't really getting like proper information out there. And and to your point on why now, uh, frankly, this is and I'm sure this is a very overused statement, but it's an unprecedented time for everyone, right? It's not a time that I've seen like in my life, and not a lot of people also haven't. There's just so many things that are going wrong in so many aspects of our lives. You can talk about the economy, you can talk about health crisis, you can talk about. We see all these photos of migrants going from their work towns back to their homes and just in distress. And so I think this is a time where the kinds of problems that we've been seeing in society are so amplified. And if at this time the media is not talking about these things, if they're not covering these things, uh, it's really a question of like how much more badly do we have to do for you to even pay attention? So that's the place from where this thought came.
Were you aware of the 1975 advertisement placed by Ashok Mahadevan, who was then
Oh yes,
26 years old and who was then a deputy editor with the Reader's Digest? Were you aware of that advertisement?
oh yes. I had actually come across that advertisement quite a few years ago, probably around 5 6 years ago. I'm a pretty avid reader. I like just reading about all these trivia and general knowledge and all these kinds of things. So
Hmm.
I'd come across this during my school time, in fact.
Hmm.
And that's where I got the inspiration from. Before I submitted this version, I had got published. I'd actually submitted a couple of different versions, and they all got rejected because I think the publishers must have sort of realized what I was trying to do, and they said we can't publish this. But then and after a couple of unsuccessful attempts is when I actually fell back to Ashok Madhavan's approach, and I saw how he had been very smartly and cleverly put that across, and that is where I got my inspiration from.
Were the earlier attempts also with the Hindu?
Yeah, there was one with the Hindu. I put a couple of online applications, a couple of other places as well, but neither of them took it. And most of the places was because uh, they wanted like some proof of death, or like a death certificate or something. And for some reason, the Hindu didn't have that uh, requirement. So it turned out that they ended up publishing this. They'll
What,
probably
what,
send in their fireballs after this.
what was the phraseology of the earlier attempts? What words did you use? Was it the similar thing or the same thing or something different?
Yeah, I think the general idea was the same. I think the exact words that I'd used were a little different. I think I had been a lot more explicit and over the top in some of my earlier iterations that actually pronounced uh, the death of democracy in a building collapse with because the fourth pillar fell down of that building and the foundation had been eroded. So I actually gave a much more descriptive sort of obituary, and that clearly didn't fly with them. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, like
Was there a specific trigger? I know you just said that things have been bad and things have been bleak, and the media has been really not doing its job. But was there a specific trigger for this? I ask you this because on Instagram you seem like a happy fellow posing in San Francisco and Rio de Janeiro and so on. What really happened, in the last few weeks or days that made you do this?
yeah, sure. So again, to my earlier point, this is sort of been something that has been building up over a while. But yes, there was an immediate trigger, and I think the last couple of weeks have been a really stark reality check for me and for people like me. Uh, it's been almost 10 or 15 days today, since the time our GDP numbers came out, and
Hmm.
that's a 24% decline. On normal times we're going at 4 5%. This is a 24% contraction,
Yeah.
and over the last two, so there's that. There's obviously a record number of corona cases every day, and ever since those GDP numbers actually came out, I really wanted to get a sense of why this is happening. Like so I'm a student of economics by training, and I was curious about okay, like is this a very unmanageable kind of an economic situation, right? Because maybe the government is focusing on health and number of cases, so maybe this could not have been avoided. So I had some very what I think are legitimate questions, and I was looking for outlets where some of these would get explored, some of these would get talked about. And
Hmm.
over the last 2 weeks specifically, I have been tuning into the primetime debates at 9 p.m. on every major news channel at 9 p.m. So I've been doing that religiously for the last 2 weeks. At
Hmm.
9 p.m., I go to each and every news channel, and it's just appalling that at a time like this, topics that are of really big importance are just not being given attention. Every day, it's the same story that is being given out, and like extensions to that story and different angles to a story. And again, like so, I just want to make sure that I'm clear when I say that I don't mean to question the merits or demerits of a particular case or a particular investigation. That's not my agenda.
Yes.
But that but is that really the only thing that people need to talk about? Is that the only thing that is bothering people? And to that, I thought the answer was a very clear no, uh, and hence this trigger.
Why did you choose the Hindu? Because this is the one paper that is perhaps spared of the criticism that you have. Why did you choose the Hindu, and how much did it cost you to place this advertisement?
Okay, so it was $1,000. This particular ad that I submitted, so costly. But I thought it's money well spent if it does come out. And as far as why the Hindu was concerned, uh, see, partly I think it was one of the first names that came up to my head, uh, along with one or two other publications, because I thought they, at least, so this is my perspective as as a layman, as someone who is only looking at this from the outside. So at least the perception that I get of the Hindu is that it is open to criticism, and it is open to critiquing the institutions as well. So that is one aspect of it, but I wouldn't say that was the entire deal. I think most of it was because, like, very logistically speaking, the Hindu was the only website that was accepting my ad through their own website, right? So all of these other newspapers, I don't know if you're probably aware, but all of these other newspapers take their advertisements through a third party, and that one requires you to go through like a lot of verification and
Sure.
death certificate and all of that. So that was actually one of the, tactically it made sense to go for the Hindu as well. And also, like, a couple of the others were actually quite expensive, prohibitively expensive, in fact. Uh, so, like, bunch of factors.
Did you write the copy yourself?
Yeah, of course. I submitted all the iterations I did myself.
No consultants, no friends who pitched in, nobody else who thought likewise like you?
No, no, of course not. Look, like we discussed, right? So the inspiration for, like, the format does come from, the emergency days and, things that we've seen in pop culture. So I would credit that. But really the thought came to me, like, I had basically woken up, uh, from a nap, right? And it was just a very weird epiphany, right? Because all of these things had been going on in my head, right, subconsciously.
Hmm.
And I thought to myself, okay, really, is the media dead? And that's
Hmm.
how, that train of thought came, that it really
You
is
know,
dead. Like, someone should call it out like it.
in the advertisement, you say media, as in media, died in Delhi. Is it
Yeah.
only Delhi where the media has died, or has it died nationally?
No, I think it's died nationally, but as someone who is from Delhi, I've lived a lot of my last few years in Mumbai, but Delhi's basically been my ground zero,
Hmm.
and so this is where I've seen most of my lived experience has been. Also, I think New Delhi is not just it is really like symbolic of our entire country, right? It's our capital.
Hmm.
It's where most of our media houses are located. Uh,
Hmm.
I thought, like, it does, like, just put the nail on its head. Like,
Hmm.
uh, it's problematic at its
Hmm.
core.
What has been the reaction so far from friends, from colleagues? What's been the reaction so far? Has anybody from your family, for example, called you and said, "Hey, beta, tumne kya kar diya?" types? Has there been reactions like that?
Yeah, a little bit. My mom got a little paranoid. She thought, like, why are you, taking all of these risks and all? Why do you want so much attention? And see, and in an ideal world, like, that shouldn't have been her reaction either. I think she's also responding to a lot of to the environment that she's living in.
Hmm.
But that did come. But I think overall the response has been overwhelmingly positive. I think all of my friends, all these random people on Twitter, everyone has been quite encouraging. In fact, I was very surprised at both the scale of the reach and also the fact that the response has been overwhelmingly positive.
Hmm.
Uh, maybe people who didn't like it are just scrolling past it and not commenting. But from my experience as a user of Twitter and social media, what I've seen is that a lot of times posts become battlegrounds for people of different beliefs, just throwing words at each other, abuses at each other. they really become battlegrounds of uncivilized natures, and that surprisingly and pleasantly surprisingly hasn't been the case with this post. I've probably received read maybe like 3 or 4 negative comments,
Hmm.
uh, but otherwise everyone's been quite encouraging.
I presume there have been no threatening phone calls or trolls and so
Not
on.
yet, not yet, not yet. I've been told by a few people that don't rule that out completely.
Hmm.
But I'm quite clear in my head that I haven't done anything wrong. So let them come.
Hmm. No, obviously you can't take down this advertisement because it's been printed in the Hindu, and I presume it's been
Yeah.
printed only in Delhi, right? Nowhere else.
Yeah, only Delhi.
Yeah, so I presume it can't be taken down anyway since it's now printed. But if you're, let's presume, I hope not, but let's presume hypothetically that if you're threatened to retract or to apologize, what will you do?
But apologize for what? Like I haven't done anything wrong. For me, I think the question does not arise. It's not as if it's not a divisive statement. It's not a statement driven by malice. It's not as if I'm, trying to destroy the media industry or something.
Of
I'm
course.
speaking from my position as someone who is concerned about, the service that I'm getting. Uh, it is in my best interest that the media becomes answerable to people like me, that the media becomes quality response to people. So I don't think I've done anything wrong in what I've said.
Absolutely. You've done nothing wrong, and I wish more people will do this. But obviously, very few people do it. In fact, no one had done it till you did it. So, not to feel
Yes.
offended at all, but I feel, that we must place this on record that this is a very real possibility in the new, so called new India that we inhabit. But let's set this aside and let's, come to a couple of questions here. Kartik, let me ask you this. This is a bad question, but let me still ask you this. Why do you think the media is in the state it is in today in India?
So it's sort of a chicken and egg problem. Uh, it there are problems on our side, which is by us I mean the viewers. There is a problem in the whole the system structure, the economic system that is supporting media today. Uh, those the way I see it, those are the two big problems, right? It's impossible to locate where the genesis of this is. Uh, I know that media houses are responding to a lot of economic pressures. Uh, they have realized, what is the type of demand that exists, what kind of content do people want to consume, and what they're not doing is, you know, think a little bit beyond the economic point and think of their moral responsibility and put a foot down that okay, this is a line that we won't cross. I think that's not happening. The people are not afraid to cross any sort of lines. It could be personal lines, it could be health risks, it could be anything. They'll do anything to get a juicy story. I think it's incorrect to blame media houses themselves
Hmm.
entirely. Right? I know they have a lot of the blame to bear, but they are not the only part of the problem. I think they are at the end of the day responding to what people want, and just like a slight segue, if you'll allow me, but I think that has been the biggest disappointment that I've had over the last 6 months. That
Hmm.
I think this time has given me a sort of reality check about the kind of people that our society is composed of, right? And I'm counting myself Hindu. But it's given me a sort of reality check that I thought that, uh, other instances have just not. There was a hotbed of political activity in India, right? There was a lot of activity, both sides, or, however many sides, everyone was active. But at least irrespective of which side your beliefs lie on, right? At least it seemed to be an ideological or a political debate. Uh, you could argue that the quality of the debate wasn't that great, but you could see that people were being moved by something like politics or ideology or beliefs. But what's happened in the last few months has has no element of politics or ideology in it, right? I think the sensationalization of a death investigation and just the all the focus on, a few personalities and everything. I think what that's speaking about is not people's politics or ideology. It's speaking about the kind of humanity and decency that people have. Uh, and that's been the biggest uh,
Do you get a chance to discuss the state of the media with friends and colleagues, and what is generally their feeling about what we in the media are doing?
people do seem to be losing faith in the media. I can definitely say that about myself personally. I used to be a very avid watcher of the TV news. I used to be a very avid reader of newspapers. And over time, I think that's definitely changed. Part of it is because, today you have information coming at you from all sides, right? You're always connected. So it's not like you have to sit for a prime time show or you have to take out time in the morning to get your news. You just get it all the time. But still, that's not the only reason. I think uh, what I feel is I just don't have that level of confidence which I used to have in that the media will, it's not guided by an agenda or it's not being guided by convenience and it's actually giving me proper facts. And without making assumptions from other people, I think I can still say fairly confidently that a lot of people my age are in both, right? And the that while this confidence and this faith is going away, it's not as if people have a lot of other outlets to get information from anyway, right? So it's a really bad situation where the existing options are becoming worse and worse, and there are no great alternatives that are coming up, right? This does not mean that like independent media is not thriving. We have seen some publications come up, but even today, like the scale is low, and the kind of stronghold that these traditional media platforms and these traditional media businesses have on people, the number of eyeballs that they have is just too large, and there's a huge deterioration in quality on that side.
So you get a sense that the lowest common denominator is whom the media is serving up, and that's why this is why we are in this position.
Definitely. I don't think, see, when someone says lowest common denominator, I think it's easy to make the assumption that there's a class or an like some sort of social spin to it. But it's not as if, so when I say lowest common denominator, I don't mean that it's just catering to small towns or villages or anything of that sort.
Hmm.
Uh, what they're catering to is really the very basest kind of emotion that anyone can have, right? It could be someone who's very poor, it could be someone who's very rich, it could be someone from any kind of a caste, right? Just the very base, and that's what the media is going for. Uh, it could be an emotion like it could be an emotion like fear, it could be an emotion like insecurity, it could be an emotion like just shade and fraud, like just wanting bad for other people. It could be that kind of an, and that's really what is being capitalized on, which is not a good thing.
Do you get a sense that people are thirsting for better media than what they are being served up at this point of time?
I think so. I think if the kind of response that I've gotten to my post is any indication, then this is a view that is shared by a lot of people, right? That is why there's the response of this nature. Uh, I think it's a very, like, even if I don't look at it, just this specific instance, I think it's a very basic human need to, feel connected, to feel like to have some sort of faith in your community, faith in your society, and have some semblance of truth in your lives. So yes, I do think that there's a thirst for quality independent media, and we are seeing people come up and try and address that. But really, the odds continue to be stacked against them, right? We're competing against like a behemoth which has so many eyeballs, so much money, and so much like just thirsty demand from that side, that it's an uphill battle for sure. But I do have hope. I think people are going to demand for better news, and I think it's going to come up.
Well, I presume that you have presumed that we in the media have also thought through some of these issues. why do you think that we in the media have not been able to address this issue? I know you mentioned economic factors and pressures of different kinds, but why do you think we in the media have been specifically, deficient in dealing with this issue? What's your
Uh,
outsider view, really?
my outsider view is that we see it's not as if the people who are inside media are a different breed of people. There's essentially the same kinds of humans that exist outside the media, uh, and which means that human beings are prone to, getting trapped in cycles and getting, caught up in situations and not being able to figure a way out. Right? I think that's happened throughout history. Right? The media is just one example of that kind of phenomenon, but people have gotten trapped into political systems which they can't come out, which they know are exploitative, which they know are extractive, but there's just no one willing to, take that, like make that first call, like bell the cat. There's no one willing to do that. Until that doesn't happen, everyone sort of gets caught into this very muddy, low quality equilibrium. No one wants to challenge the status quo because the cost of challenging status quo for any one person is so high, and the rewards are just not like visible. So that's, I think, a general phenomenon that exists anywhere. It exists in politics. It exists in business. It exists in companies like the one that I work for. It exists in our education system, for example, right? Like we have just gotten used to this a very low quality equilibrium where we're okay कि मतलब हाँ चल रहा है. This is how the way things are, and what is the point of trying to change anything? And I think that sort of has gotten translated into the media as well. That's my like perspective when I look at it from the outside, is that they have just gotten used to this kind of economic system, and no one has been able to come up with a solution to break that chakravyuh, so to speak, right? Like no one has that thing that breaks this formation, and that I think is going to require a lot of introspection. It's going to require a lot of brain power to try and come up with an alternative.
You're a 24-year-old young man. What is in your mind's eye, the formulation of what the media should really be doing? What is your, ideal expectation, optimum expectation from the media?
The ideal is the Garden of Eden. Like in an ideal world, the media is not biased in any way whatsoever. In an ideal world, the motivations of the people for doing something like this are not limited to their material well-being, right? Like this is not to say that anyone who's going into the media has to go for social service, right? But I think anyone who's entering the media should have some sort of moral conviction on what their role is. This does not mean that you put political convictions on people that are that a particular way of thinking is right or wrong. That's not the point. The point is that search for objectivity, that search for truth is something that should come as a very natural calling for anyone who's joining the media. So for me, the ideal scenario is that every new person that is joining the media business or the media industry, whatever, every new person is guided by these principles, right? And I think the idea is that once you change, like if a lot of the critical mass of people starts thinking in a particular way, the system itself will also change with time. So that is a very ideal scenario, and I think this is a very difficult scenario because it's ideal and because it really dependent on like an individual sense of consciousness or an individual sense of responsibility, uh, which is too difficult to inculcate. I realize that. But for me, that's the ideal, right? In a world that's a media that's giving you the truth, that you have, as a consumer, you have faith in. And therefore, like you see that it's actually talking about the relevant issues of the day. Whatever is important to common people, that's it. That is what is being talked about.
But surely a smart young fellow like you is aware that there are two very separate issues here which you're talking about. One, of course, is media freedom, which is a very live and real threat in this country. And the other one is of media quality. I think the two things are very interlinked, but surely I think there are two very separate issues, as and I'm sure you're aware of that.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, that's a very good point. I think they are separate issues, but again, like you only said, they're quite interlinked, right? It is really, I think it eventually boils down to what role does the news reporter think that they are performing, or what role does the news editor think that they are performing. If they believe in the ideals of the media, of everything, when you talk about it being the fourth pillar of democracy and the vanguard of truth and all of that. Uh,
Mm.
if you believe in those ideals, then you automatically believe in a free media and a media that is objective. So by definition, it is giving you quality news. Uh,
Mm.
it, and I think see, the thing is, it's not, uh, they are two sides of the same coin in the sense that you can't have one without the other. If you have a media that is unfree, then there is no way you can expect quality news from it, right? Because its intentions are not dictated by itself. It is responding to some motivations, right? So an unfree media cannot give you good news, and a media that is not giving you good news, right, which is basically sacrifice its quality on for things like money or things like economic incentives and all, at the end of the day has compromised on its own integrity. So I wouldn't call it free, right? So you can only have both of them together. You can't have one and not the other.
But what if I were to tell you that there are many in the media and not just in English who are competent, who have great regard for quality, who are fine journalists, but their hands are tied because of the current political situation, because of their ownership patterns, because of the
Yeah.
kind of bosses they have. What would your response be when I say that to justify what is happening?
Yeah, no, that's precisely my point as well. Like I completely agree with you that there are people who are trying to give you like who trying to be ethical about it, right? I know there are people who coming with good intentions. In fact, I have friends of mine who have entered the media space over the last few years, and I know, knowing some of them, that they have, like, they're generally concerned themselves, like this, that they don't feel that they're being allowed to do the kind of work that they signed up to do. So there's no dearth of good people. I'm in complete agreement with you over there. Uh, but it really comes down to, you know, s- people and societies getting trapped in a certain kind of a cycle, right? And that's what I was talking to you about earlier. That if it sometimes it's just difficult for anyone to break, because it's classic game theory, right? Like if the individual cost that one person has to come up and make a statement, speak out against an editor or speak out against whatever powers are influence that editor. That individual is concerned for her or his job. They're concerned about whether they can, feed their family, or they can form a career. They're scared about public ridicule and shame, and being labeled as all kinds of things in today's environment. So the costs are just huge, and so it's not a surprise that no one is being able to do that, right? Like, I mean, when we began this conversation, like some of the first things that you also asked me were, whether I've gotten any threatening messages, or what do people feel? Did my family members feel scared or not, right? And it's completely understandable that people are in that situation, which is why it's going to take a large amount of like collective effort and collective consciousness. I think, like, the way people mobilize themselves over long periods of time, and there are change at some point, and it's going to take a lot of thinking around how we change the economic structure and all the incentive that exists in the system. So it's a tough road.
ठीक है, let's come back to your advertisement. Uh, uh, is it just the media that has died in the year 2020, or do you think there is room for advertisements on the death of the judiciary, the death of the legislature, the death of the executive, the bureaucracy, the police? It seems to be that you could issue an advertisement for virtually everybody today.
Yeah, no, that's definitely, like, a bunch of institutions, if not dead, they're definitely on life support. uh, I See, I think everyone has some sort of a, like a recency bias. My recency bias is the 24 years that I've lived, right? Of which a lot of time I was young as well. But I have never thought of or seen this kind of uh, a fear or a paranoia uh, in society, right? Among my friends, among the media, just everyone. And if so definitely that's a concern, right? When we hear news of institutions like the judiciary not taking criticism, like thinking that just a couple of tweets are questioning the integrity of that whole institution, that really raises questions about how thin is our skin today, right? uh, it's as just at an institutional level, not at you know of one political party or the other. Like, just the people in these institutions seem to have a very thin skin today. So you're right. Like, you could pronounce the death of anything. But then again, the inspiration that I had was from the emergency time, right? It's not as if, at least from what I hear from people who've lived longer than I have, people who've read more than I have, that things like these do happen. Some people think that it's a cycle, right? Like, there are cycles of authoritarianism and then liberalism, and so these things happen in cycles, and at the end of the day, after some point, like, things do settle down. But where I have a bit of a doubt about that today is that really the kind of, and again, I'm overusing that phrase, but the reality check that I've gotten in terms of, just the kind of people that we as a society are, what type of content we like to watch, what really gets us excited. I don't know if that can be changed, that mentality or that uh, those kinds of emotions can go away with time.
Obviously, you were not born during the emergency. You were not born during 1984. You were not born in 1991. So obviously, all of this is, memory. But
Exactly.
you seem to think that the media is more dead than most other institutions. That's what I gather from your answer.
I think so. And see, the thing is, see, the media is the sort is the is our window into our society, right? That's how I would put it. If your three pillars of your government, of your legislature, executive, and judiciary are what is supposed to, actually do the day to day, the media or the fourth institution is supposed to give common people like you and me the ability to, put a check on whether that's happening properly or not.
Mm,
And the
mm,
moment that dies, I think it's a domino effect, right?
mm,
The moment the death of the media in that sense, I would say, is probably a worse situation to be in than the death of one arm of the government, because I do think those can be rebuilt. But
mm,
the time the media dies, what that means is that the entire scrutiny over the system, the entire accountability of that system is just gone, right? You're taking people away from the institutions that are meant for them. And
mm.
and that's why I feel the death of the media is just that much more harmful, right? It's not the same as a bad government or a autocratic government, right? The media is enabling a lot of these things. It's enabling the disenfranchisement of people.
We can go on and on. But let me ask you a very simple question. You have put out a tweet no more than 280 characters, in fact, shorter than that, with this advertisement. Do you think any of the newspapers tomorrow morning or any of the TV channels tonight is going to cover what you've done, is going to report what you've said?
The thing is, I mean, without taking names, I could probably think of a couple of them that might have the chance of doing it, right? Some of them that I could say, okay, there's a 5% chance that these ones might do it. I wouldn't like to take names. But there are some that I know that just definitely no conceivable universe are they going to talk about these things. But that's a very interesting question, because what's happened, and like I told you, right, I've been very religiously following this 9 p.m. news over the last couple of weeks at least, right? And because I wanted to see people talk about the GDP, Corona, China, all of that. What's very, very like depressing is that there are media houses who are talking about the very fact that integrity in media is dying while they're doing the same thing, right? That
Mm,
sheer hypocrisy of, they've just co-opted that message. Like I've seen people like news channels which are, creating dramatic reconstructions of a particular death case, right? With entirely like with full like CBI clothes and get-ups and everything. And the right at 8:30, and then at 9 o'clock, the anchor of that news channel only is saying that, integrity in media has died because this news channel is interviewing that person. And it's just it's become a sling like a mudslinging fest. That before someone comes and says, you are wrong, you start saying, no, 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 you are wrong. So there's no way the blame will stick to you because everyone's throwing blame at each other. So that's why I don't really have a lot of hope that I'm going to get featured in like news or newspapers. And I think, see, like it's still transient, right? It could be like, to be very honest, someone could feature something like this in a TV show, right? Do a 15-minute segment on that. But then what is that going to change? Right? Tomorrow, this is going to become old news, right? I go on social media all the time, and I've seen for a fact that things trend for a while and then they become viral and then they go away. That is the reality of social media. That is the reality of media also. So I know that this is a very temporary thing. Uh, what really remains to be seen is whether this is able to spark a conversation within the media themselves or not. And that's going to be an interesting one.
The reason I asked you that question was because Ashok Mahadevan inserted that advertisement 45 years ago. And then even 45 years later, we are able to remember that advertisement, and you yourself could remember that ad and use it. And the point is that if your advertisement of today is forgotten, it basically means and validates what you're trying to say.
Correct. Definitely. I hope that that common people will retain this message. I hope that, all the people who have interacted with this post or, this article, I think they will retain it in their memories. They will transfer it to their friends, families, whoever they interact with. And I hope in that way it will live in public memory, right? It will live in individuals' memories as well. So that, and hopefully not 45 years later, but like today, from tomorrow, like at in real time, more and more people are becoming questioning, more and more people are becoming dissatisfied. I would hope that that happens. Whether or not the newspapers cover this today, tomorrow or not is just very difficult to predict. And I don't even think that that is going to be the game changer.
Well, one last question. In Ashok Mahadevan's advertisement in 1975 in the Times of India, democracy was mounted by truth, liberty, faith, hope, and justice.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
noticed that in your advertisement in the Hindu, you don't mention any of these relatives of democracy. So my question to you, Kartik, finally is there any hope for India, one of the people who mount democracy in 75?
I think the hope will remain as long as there is even like one individual who has hope, right? As a country, forget as a country, like as a world, as a civilization, like human history has seen like really, really bad times, right? This is not today is a bad time because we are living in it, and while you're living in it, it seems as if we'll never come out. But humans, Indians, everyone's come out of worse things. We have come out of slavery. We have come out of, being subjugated under a foreign rule. We have come out of the emergency. And yes, today it seems like we're slipping back. But I think that's no reason to not be hopeful. Uh, and in fact, like if I weren't hopeful, I wouldn't have taken this step of putting this obituary out. If I weren't hopeful, I wouldn't even have bothered. Like I would have just been like, "Kya farak padta hai?" Which is generally like my attitude to a lot of things. But because I do see there are some things that I just have the inability to change as one person. Uh, Yet I think that things do change as long as people keep talking to each other, as long as even one person is having hope and spreading it out, uh, better times will come.
Well, that's very well said, Karthik. On LinkedIn, in your profile on LinkedIn, you say you're an incoming student of public policy at Harvard. I wish you well, and I hope you keep inserting advertisements from Cambridge and keep reminding media folk here of their duties and their mandate. And I thank you very much once again for joining me, Kartik. And you've held a mirror. You've really held a mirror to our profession, our wonderful profession. And I hope many of my colleagues in this profession will remember what you have said and will keep it in mind. Thank you very much for joining me, and thank you for your
Thank you.
time.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And I'll just before I just end, I think as long as like there are people who are following your lead and just committed to ethics in journalism and all, I think there will be definitely a better time. Thanks so much for having me on this podcast.
Inshallah. Thank you so much.
24 घंटा बिजली नहीं मिली, गांव में अस्पताल नहीं बना है, युवा बेरोजगार है, किसान आत्महत्या करे, खेत में पानी नहीं पहुंचा, घर में बिजली नहीं पहुंची, युवा के पास रोजगार नहीं पहुंचा, करा क्या आपने?
The theme music for J-Pod was composed by me, Krishna Prasad, using GarageBand. You can follow Kartik Sahni on Twitter at Kartik Sahni, KartikSahni. Kartik is also on Instagram and LinkedIn. Thank you all for listening in.